Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. Today we're going to be looking at show and tells for our swirls. So we're going to take a peek at some of my original first quilts that I ever quilted that use a swirl, as well as some of my more recent ones. So you can see my progression as a quilter. Hopefully you'll feel better about where your swirls are at right now if you've just given them a try. These show and tell videos are to give you an idea of how you can combine these stitches to create an infinite number of possibilities for your quilting. I typically use the 4 stitches that we are going over in this series in any number of combinations in my quilting, along with ruler work, which we didn't cover in this series, but we might in a future one. And with that, I'm able to get so many different options and come up with a new look that really highlights the fabric. Because we spend so much time piecing the top, a lot of times we treat the quilt as something that just needs to get done so we can use it. And you know, if it's utilitarian, then that makes total sense. But if you have spent 40, 50, 60, maybe 100 hours piecing a quilt top, you should not do a giant all over stipple meander and call it done. You should give that quilt top the respect it deserves and quilt it appropriately. So I hope this series is giving you the tools to do that. All right, let's get started with the very first swirl I ever attempted to do. And of course I did it on a king size quilt because that's how I roll. If I'm gonna learn something, I'm gonna learn it and I'm gonna get that down. So we're gonna take a look at this. So we're gonna see this quilt a couple of times because I've used 3 of our stitches in this one. This was the, I think it was the 3rd quilt I ever did on a long arm. And I had done quilts on my home sewing machine before this, but typically just walking foot or occasionally a stipple meander. And so I wanted to originally do swirls over the entire quilt, but the long arm that I was working on and renting time on was having some thread issues. So I decided to only do them in the border because I had started that, so I committed I had to finish. And then I was going to figure everything else out. So this border is 12 inches. So I've got essentially 6 inches here and 6 inches here. So what I kind of tried to do was create a swirl that would fill every 6 inches. This was before I really knew that you were supposed to kind of have a swirl that came to a point. So what I did is I kind of have a nice even loop at the end. So you can see here that I've got a loop at the end here instead of that nice point. So what I did was I kind of circled in and followed all the way around to get to the center and then looped my way back out. And what I didn't know at the time, because I had not been quilting long enough to know this, is that when you have that point, that is a good place to kind of stop and reevaluate if you need to on where you're going to go next, which sometimes we need when we're quilting. We need to be able to pause and be like, where was I? Where am I going next? And when you are doing loops like this, there is no good spot to do that. So that can be really challenging, especially when you're a new quilter. Now, is this perfect? No. My swirls look more like squares because they're very boxy. Instead of having a nice curve here, I've got very boxy corners as I go around here, but I'm filling the space nicely. It's working out. It's very uniform here. There is literally like one of these in every single 6 inch portion of this. And you know, it works. It totally works. It was my first time doing this, and it is what it is. And I love this quilt. This quilt gets pulled out every single January and put on my bed. So even years and years later, even though it is not the finest example of my quilting, it still gets used a lot. So that's what matters. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to love it, and you have to be able to use it and really enjoy it. All right, let's take a look at another one where I was able to do it as an all over. All right, so this one is Winter Blues. This one we do have a pattern for, but there is not a tutorial because it is a very old pattern. It is probably not written anywhere near to the standards that we have today, which is why it is less than our current patterns. But this one, we'll zoom in just a second. So what I did was I grabbed a strip roll and then some coordinating fabric for my backgrounds. And there is not a lot of contrast in this one because these are all so closely linked. But it is cool. Like, it's the same technical design as the one we just saw, but because the color placement is so different and the color values are very similar, it just doesn't have that same pop. So that shows you how that can really change. So whatever it was, the tension gods or whatever were working better from when I quilted the last one to when I quilted this one. And I was able to do an all over. But what I did, it's the exact same design where I had that loop in the center instead of the point, but I was changing my scale. I think between the two of those, I had watched a craftsy class from Angela Walters. I was trying out new things. I mean, that's really the best thing is you want to take courses like this one. You want to take courses anywhere you can find them. In person is great, but I know that's challenging right now, where you can just get inspired and then go try the thing. And it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. Maybe do a big quilt and then it may not be perfect at the beginning, but it certainly will be at the end, and that's the part that you can put where people are going to see it most. So let's take a little bit closer look, and then we'll move on to some more recent examples. This one is very busy, so I'm not sure that you're even going to be able to see as much, but we have a swirl here between my fingers, and then we have a swirl here right next to it in between my fingers. So it was just kind of playing around with filling the space in well, and so we have tiny, we have medium, and then next to this we have very big. And so I was just sort of playing around and seeing how it would feel and how it would fit together if I was just practicing different size swirls. And it really has like the commotion of having a big swirling snowstorm, which is perfect for winter blues. But also, here's a good note for you guys. When you're practicing your free motion quilting stitches, this is why we use solid fabrics for our actual course here, because you can see what you're doing really well. But when you go to do it and you're practicing for the first time, if you pick a really busy print, you might have a little bit of a hard time seeing what you're doing, but nobody is ever going to see your mistakes in the finished thing because there's just a lot going on. So if you match your thread really well to your background, which I did in this case, people are just going to see texture. Like I can see in person that there's this big swirly texture all over this quilt. It looks really cool. It's fun. I'm not noticing that my swirls are all like egg-shaped and not actually like circles like they should be. And they are literally all over the board. There's no rhyme or reason to this, and they're kind of a hot mess. But it doesn't matter because it's fine. It looks great. It's busy. Nobody can really tell that. And so it's just a quilt that can get enjoyed for years and years to come without feeling like I have to nitpick it because you can barely tell with all the busyness of the fabric. All right, so now we're going to start with some more recent examples. This is Lillyfield, and I'm going to start by showing you guys the back because you can see the swirls really easily. I also did ruler work to outline my diamonds and then also do some outlining here as well. I will tell you, I was very pregnant with my daughter, who is now named Lily. I didn't think I was going to win the name battle, and so I named the quilt Lillyfield because I wanted to name something Lily. And it turns out she has a quilt name for her. But so at this point in the pregnancy, I could not stand for more than an hour, even with like a belly band thing, without incredible pain because I was just very large. And so I did not do like this big, not very dense hole here is not great. Like you should have equal density of quilting between whatever you're doing with your free motion and then whatever you're doing in your other blocks. So this is not ideal, but you know, life happens. You can't, maybe you got a deadline, maybe you also can't stand for a very long time because of whatever is going on. But the goal here is to be able to move around really well. I think this might be before we started doing free motion quilting tutorials, so I don't think we have video of this one, but you can see that I started on the inside of a diamond and worked my way out and then just kind of worked all around the edge of that diamond, all the way up to the top, kind of keeping a similar size, but it does get a little bit bigger over here as opposed to coming down. And then I work my way back down, filling into the side, filling into the center, and then back to the center. And then I was able to go out and repeat that process for all 6 of my diamonds, always stopping in that center and then eventually break thread and move on to another diamond. So let's take a look at what this looks like from the front. This pattern, by the way, is in my book, Fat Quarter Patchwork Quilts. You can grab that on our website and we'll send you out a signed copy. So you can see that what I did was in the center of the stars. That's where I had all of those swirls, again with the ruler work outlining. And then I did just do outlining just a little bit in these background squares. What I should have done if I did not have physical limitations is do a lot more ruler work within this to sort of fill that in more, or maybe done some additional free motion quilting. I would have picked a different design though. So what I'd like to do is do something different in the background than I do in the block, because I feel that that helps set it apart really well. I mean, you could really tell when we were looking at the back that that block just popped with all of those swirls coming out to the points of those diamonds. So if I was able to accentuate this more with some ruler work, or maybe do a different type of free motion quilting design in here that did not take away from this, help sort of dampen this down so that the block was what popped and came out to you, that would have been a really good option. But that's one of my best tips, is when you are mixing and matching designs, you want to make sure that you are really helping to make your prints pop and your background fade to the background. So that's what I always am trying to do. All right, so this quilt is also going to make an appearance again. This one is called Tree Star, and it is a fun one. We actually still have some of this fabric. I cannot say that usually, but I over-ordered significantly for this month's Stashing with Stephanie, so we still have some available if you've fallen in love with it, at least at the time that I'm filming this series initially. So this one is a Stashing with Stephanie design. And like I said, sometimes when we get those, we have to get it done fast. So I have to come up with something that will both make everything pop and be able to be done quickly. So we have some wavy lines that we'll take a look at later in the star to help make that pop. And in the background, I needed something that would both work as a nice big filler for the setting triangles and then also in between. So the swirl came to the rescue there. I'm going to zoom in so we can take a closer look. So you can see, and we do have a video tutorial that shows the entire process of this quilt and how I quilted it. So make sure to link that so you can watch it. But you can see that it's just a really simple swirl. It was that simplified swirl that I showed you guys, and a medium to smallish scale in the background. And the reason why we picked a medium to smallish scale for the background is because I eventually needed to be able to move through and do these. And some of them just look like the wave that we did in the border one. Some of them have a few more. They don't all look awesome. Like this one is, I'm not sure what the heck I was thinking there. This is a really weird looking little swirl, but others look more put together. And then this one looks like I was able to do the whole little octagon, or that's not an octagon, the entire hexagon all in one go, where I kind of just filled in every single triangle. But basically every single triangle got one swirl, and I was able to really easily fill everything in and make it fun, and also really easily separate that background from the star itself. The other way I often take my cues for what I'm going to do in the quilting is by taking a look at the fabric. And this background is one of the basics that's available from Figo, and it has a very swirly quality to it. There's all these dash lines that are kind of going all over the place. So the swirl in this case, I think, complements this fabric really well and is able to really just kind of play with it and also do a very good job of making the stars the center of the show. So we'll take a look at this one again a little bit later when we are looking at wavy lines show and tell. All right, well, I hope you are enjoying these show and tell videos. I hope it's giving you lots of ideas on how you can mix and match these stitches to create an infinite number of possibilities. You really want the quilt to speak to you. Like, I do a lot of thinking about this as I'm actually piecing the quilt, of how would I best separate my background from my block? How am I best going to accentuate the design of the quilt with my quilting? Am I going to want to do some thread changes as I do this to help make that pop, or can I get away with just having one thread for everything? These are all questions that are circulating in my mind as I'm working on it. And then there's always a time element. You know, sometimes I would like to do more, but I do not have time to do it. And I'm sure you guys are in those situations as well. Maybe you're trying to get something done for a gift for the holidays or birthday, anniversary, and you would like to do more, but you have to come up with something that will work in the time that you have. So those are all things to think about. And I just love mixing, and I hope that this is giving you good ideas, that we're showing a couple of quilts a couple of times so you can see how these different stitches can work together to make your quilts look absolutely amazing. Whether you're at the very beginning, like the Snowpocalypse one that I keep showing that has, we're going to see it one more time, 3 of these basic stitches in it. It was like the 3rd quilt I ever did, but it is still the 3 stitches that I still use all the time, just in different ways, and eventually get better and better at them. And it is a lot of fun. So I hope you are enjoying this and that you're going to use these skills to help bring your quilts to life and help accentuate everything with your quilting decisions. All right, don't forget we've got kits available for this, so you can practice on nice solid fabric so you can see all your stitches and you know where you are and where you are going, so that way you're able to do this for the real deal when you have some busy fabrics. And we also have the stencil packs. You can get the stitches down so that way you can then customize them later in an infinite number of ways. And don't forget to grab your pattern. There are different instructions. It comes as one document, one PDF, but there are different instructions for quilt as you go versus long arm. So make sure you are following the correct one. All right, until next time, we're going to be moving on to a different stitch in the next video. So have some fun, and until next time, happy quilting.